So, our speaker this afternoon is Ross Sanger, who is a digital learning developer from UCAS. So I'll hand over to Ross to give us kind of an update on everything that's happening with UCAS, because I know there have been some changes sort of this academic year.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emma. Thanks, Samantha. Just want to make sure you can see this first of all on the screen. Is that okay?
Yep, can see that.
Oh, lovely. Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. Lovely to be here this afternoon and join you. Yes, my name's Ross Sanger. I'm a digital learning developer here at UCAS. Lots of updates to give you this afternoon, some statistics, lots of information in terms of changes to the application. And I'm sure you've heard about the new reference update. We're going to have a little look at that towards the end, along with confirmation and clearing looking forward. So if you've got any questions, yeah, pop them in the chat. We'll come to those at the end. I'd love to answer some for you. If I can't, I will get the answers for you. So without further ado, I thought we'd just start off the session this afternoon looking back towards 2022. I've got some statistics I want to pull out and explain to you that we've seen from last year's cycle. So in last year's cycle for 2022, there was a record number of 18-year-olds that applied from the most disadvantaged areas in the UK. That were actually accepted. So it ended up being there was 32,420 students that were accepted compared to the previous year of 30,910, so nearly up by 5%. So that was the biggest find that we saw for 2022, a record number of 18-year-olds from those most disadvantaged areas. Overall, there was a total of 761,740 applicants of all ages and domiciles that applied. And just keep that in mind as we go on to a few slides time. So around 750,000 if you want to have a round number. And that was actually up by 2.1% on 2021. But of those, 563,175 were accepted, and that's only a slight increase on 2021. But essentially, we are starting to see quite a growth over the last few years. We've also seen that the overall entry rate for UK 18-year-olds was 37.5% for 2022, which is actually the second highest on record. The year before 2021, it was 38.3%. So essentially, in the last two cycles, we've seen the highest entry rate for UK 18-year-olds, alongside with those for the actual four nations being the highest as well. So again, significant growth over the last few years from where we've been previously. And finally, just to highlight, we've also seen a number of UK 18-year-olds that are securing their firm choice of course. Actually, again, only second to last year's high. So this year, 200,615 UK 18-year-olds that secured their firm choice, where obviously the year before 2021 was the highest that we had. So that's again a huge significant growth we've seen from 2022 overall. Now, what I want to move on is actually look a bit more in detail at the January equal consideration deadline. So first of all, looking at the January deadline statistics, sort of relevant to last cycle, and then obviously before the pandemic of 2020 to really look at the comparison. I think overall our figures actually reveal a continued strong demand, but overall there's been a slight dip on last year's record numbers that we've had. But seeing the difference between this cycle for January and 2022 really highlights just how different the pandemic year statistics have shown us. So whilst the number of applicants is below the number seen in 2021 and 2022, it still remains the third highest on record. So it's 5% higher than it was in 2020. And significantly, 10 years ago, the numbers that have applied 42% higher than 2013. So we are seeing a massive growth year on year overall. And as I said, I'll show you some more information on that, as that trend just shows us that it's going upwards. We've also seen some strong variations by subjects, and that includes for all ages and domiciles, with really robust growth in courses such as computing, which is up by 9.6%, and law has been up by 2.1% in demand. But there's also been a fall in courses such as nursing, which is down by 18.6%, and education teaching, actually, which is down by 15.6%. So those areas are a slight decrease. There may also be additional environmental pressures that we're seeing that are having an impact on demand. in this particular cycle. As you'd expect, UCAS has been asked quite regularly about the rising cost of living that may have influenced student behaviour. I think at this moment in time, and the conversations I've had, it's quite it's probably a bit too early to tell what that is, but it does remain to be an area that we are continuing to investigate, and we will share insights throughout the cycle. However, one thing we do know is that since the pandemic, students have really become more financially aware. We also know that applicants say to us that the cost of living is one of the biggest barriers to entering higher education, and has become more of a concern than tuition fees. So more recently, through our UCAS national survey that we send out, we've seen more students express an interest in part-time employment than ever before. And actually 58% were considering getting part-time work through our survey when they answered that. 58%, quite a huge amount. So essentially, different things to be thinking about now when making those decisions over their choices. So actually looking in comparison to 2022, overall, the January deadline saw applications for undergraduate, as I say, slightly fall by 2.3%. So they were actually 596,590 that we saw. Obviously, that may have actually grown since then with later applications sent through, but that's still 2.3% down from what they were in 2022, around 610,000. And the overall number of UK 18-year-olds applying also decreased by 1.8%. But again, that was significantly up on the pre-pandemic figure, so 14.3% up from what it was before the pandemic. So again, it's just a significant rise, and we are looking at this comparison and difference over the last few years. And the other really big statistic to pull out from the January deadline is that the UK mature applicants that have applied has fallen considerably compared to last year by 14%. And one of the things we feel this may be due to is because of that huge demand for nursing courses, for example, which may have decreased. But yes, overall down by 14%. Now, bearing in mind some of the things I've talked about there, which essentially highlights that we are on an upward trajectory of applications, some of the work that we can do, the analytical expertise and knowledge of trends in patterns of applications and acceptances that we have access to, obviously allows us to make predictions about future applicant and provider behaviours. And something you may have heard about that we have as work and have a page on our website is all about Journey to a Million. And what Journey to a Million means is that we do predict by 2030 that we could well receive 1 million applications sent through to us. Now, that's driven by two factors. As you can see there, we do believe by then the 18-year-olds increasing that will apply is up by 126%, 126,000. And the other area that will increase is through international demand of 90,000. So as I said, at the moment, we're around 750,000. So in the next sort of 6 to 7 years, there is going to be what we feel is significant growth. And that's just something to have in the back of your mind as we look at a few things today, just to think how we can support with other ideas going forward to support students. The students that actually could be applying in 2030 are currently the year sevens. So it's something to bear in mind when you think about the UCAS hub and whether they could access that earlier to get support, that discovery work to look at their choices, make a little bit of decision earlier, perhaps around when they get towards year 10 and 11. But just something I wanted to kind of paint as a picture. It is a prediction. We don't know if this will happen, but looking at the work we've done already and showing you the growth that we've had significantly from the other side of the pandemic, it is starting to grow quite a lot in numbers. So that leads me through to my first thing I want to talk about as another idea, obviously, that UCAS has delved into massively. We've got the get-go to, as announced by the Department of Education, that from autumn 2023, we're going to expand our service so that young people can see more personalised options. And one of those things is going to be apprenticeships. So essentially from 2024, we're hoping that students will then be able to apply for apprenticeships through UCAS alongside their undergraduate degree application. And there's lots of vacancies and information currently already on UCAS, but that growth and having that parity of choice in front of them for the subjects that they're looking at will really help, especially thinking back to previously with Journey to a Million and that growth that's happening, to think about those other opportunities out there. And I've got some really key statistics here to explain that growth. And the first thing to say straight away is that new people that are actually coming to UCAS already believe, so over 600,000 there that are coming to us, never accessed our website before, and are going to our apprenticeship web pages. So they believe that this is a place to come and know that they can get the information for all their pathways going forward, which is why we've been so excited and wanting to take over and have as much information about apprenticeships, the search facility, and being able to apply through us. We've then obviously developed our content on apprenticeships. So we've got lots of industry guides now to help students understand the areas that they could go into for apprenticeships, lots of different guides. And they've actually had a 41% increase in the last year in views, well over 1 million. So again, it's showing that everyone wants to come through and actually do that research. Maybe not going to go and apply, but sometimes just trying to work out what else is out there and making that really good decision with everything in their mind. We've also seen, because we've now got the UCAS, well, we've had the UCAS Career Finder for a while, but this has now grown. We are going to have more vacancies through us to actually apply and search for vacancies for apprenticeships. That has had a 21% increase as well in the last year. And when you find a vacancy for an apprenticeship through us, 44% now are now clicking through to apply to those apprenticeships that they're finding. So it's not just the intrigue and seeing what's available. We are getting now a growth of those going, right, I'm going to go through and click and apply to the employer. And finally, one of the great things we have found out and really supports what we're doing is that 40% of those that are interested in undergraduate degrees are also interested in apprenticeships. So we know how important it will be, as we look in a minute, to get more information about apprenticeships alongside undergraduate degree information in the UCAS hub. So everything is together in one space when they're doing their research and making those decisions. And to help them, just so you know, the apprenticeship page on UCAS, ucas.com/apprenticeships, lots of information purely on what an apprenticeship is, because there'll be lots of students you're supporting who may not know the key benefits, really how to find out whether it's right for them as an alternative decision to going to university or college. Those industry guides I was talking about, a great way to look at an area they're interested in and imagining that long-term vision of what it would be like to work in that industry by looking at pros and cons, case studies, salaries, the job roles that they could do, just really starting to bring it to life by viewing that information through our website. Degree apprenticeships are also on the rise. So we've clearly identified that. There is a search filter that you can use on our course search to look at degree apprenticeships. But again, we've clearly identified how they work, what you'd need to apply. So lots of advice there. And finally, also the UCAS Career Finder, where you can search for those apprenticeship vacancies and apply. And the other good thing to remember with this, if you just explore to get an idea, is that you can say to students, set up job alerts. So tell the career finder what it is you're interested in. So when an opportunity comes up, we will email to let them know, or give them a notification to say, this opportunity's arrived. Do you want to have a look at it? Do you want to apply? Because obviously applying to apprenticeships works not on a cycle like the undergraduate cycle. So it's just knowing when those opportunities become available. And for you, just to increase your knowledge or support that you may need to understand more with apprenticeships, we spent some time over the last year and into the start of this year creating a e-learning course just on apprenticeships to support you, and that can be accessed in our professional development platform. It's free to enroll on, so you can actually access this, log in, and complete some of the units. So ranging from what an apprenticeship is, how to search and apply, thinking about universities and apprenticeships, the differences and what the pros and cons are between the two, and those resources to help. So absolutely do have a look at that if you want to get that support and find out more about apprenticeships for those that you're helping. So that takes us to 2024. Let's hop on and have a look at the cycle and some of the updates for this year. So the application itself went live just over a month ago on the 16th of May. So we're essentially in that crossover period as we're dealing with 2023 applications, and we're setting up 2024 live, where many students will be obviously starting to log into the UCAS hub and starting to have a little look at what needs to be completed in the application, filling in those sections, getting a bit more understanding of what they need to do. 5th of September is the day that the application can be sent to UCAS. So plenty of time to go through that research discovery stage and start completing areas of it. But there's obviously no major rushes ended because you can't do it until then. And those first students we're going to be supporting will be for the 16th of October deadline for medicine, veterinary, dentistry, and courses at Oxford or Cambridge. Now, you may notice that that deadline is one day later this year on the 16th of October. So it's usually on the 15th, but seeing that the deadline fell on a Sunday, we thought it might be best just to move it to the Monday. So it will be the 16th of October this year. So how are we going to work for that deadline? Just make sure, as we say, for that deadline and for the January deadline, I'll talk in a minute. It's really important to think about an internal deadline for the students you're supporting to make sure you've done everything in time for these deadlines, because that's obviously extremely strict, that needs to be sent in by then. So you may want to set that in late September to make sure you've done everything to support that student, and the same for January, which, as you can see, is the latest I've certainly ever seen it. The 31st of January is the last Wednesday of January, something that we've changed to in the last couple of years. So if you are having an internal deadline, perhaps at the end of November or but sometime before Christmas, it's great knowing that you've got that time on the other side of Christmas if you need to make any amendments or support with a student, and they've got right up until the end of the month on the 31st of January to submit it. Always bear in mind there is the late deadline of the 30th of June. So if anybody does need support with sending a late application, we can still receive them. Obviously, it's not what we want them to aim towards, because it's not guaranteed they'll get a decision unless they perhaps contact the university and college and check, but they are able to submit up to the 30th of June. And don't forget, there is extra and clearing in between to add additional choices depending on their circumstances. But essentially, yes, 16th of October and the 31st of January are the two on-time deadlines to support students towards. And here it is then, the UCAS Hub. And I'm sure you're maybe very familiar and had a look at the UCAS Hub, but I wanted to include this screenshot because the look of it has slightly changed in the last couple of weeks, where we have updated it. And just sort of in terms of when you log in to view the tiles, they laid out a bit further down the page. And obviously, to start your application, you go up to the top to do so, to continue that. So all the information is still there that we had before. The careers quiz to help open up those opportunities and think about a student's personality traits, see what's out there, and also what to study next, which is a great idea of, right, I've got these A levels I'm taking, which students went on to study what from taking these A levels. So some brilliant discovery tools that, again, are going to really help support those students you're helping over the next few years, even before they're applying, or obviously the year 12s you're helping in the cycle coming up. So there it is, UCAS Hub. This is where you go to make the application. Now, there are some significant new changes to the application for 2024. One of the things they will see in the gender question is that there are now 2 additional responses that can be selected. There is now "I prefer not to say" and "I use another term" that's in the application. We've also taken the decision to change the application fee for 2024 to £27.50 and remove the single choice application fee. So it means that multiple choice fee now covers the application for 5 choices, for using UCAS Extra if required, clearing, and even clearing plus. So it's just one set fee now as a one-off application fee for applying. And finally, obviously, we do have the reference that's going to be split into 3 structured sections, which I'm going to talk about a bit later on, which you may have already heard already, but just to make sure that, just to let you know, that has been a significant change. One other thing I haven't highlighted on here, just to make you aware that you may have accessed, we do have a historic entry grades tool that's available in the Advisor portal. That's something that actually shares course level information on the grades students hold when entering higher education. We have been told that students would like that information, so that they'd like to look historically over the last, say, 4 or 5 years as we're looking in data to see what the historic entry grades were for those places they're looking to apply to. So I haven't put it on here, but later this year, we're looking to get that available on ucas.com to give students that visibility over the range of grade profiles that have been accepted, as I say, the sort of last 4 or 5 years. So do be aware of that. You can look at it. It's on the Advisor portal, but we're looking to move it to ucas.com so it can support students when they're making their decisions. But don't worry, that's not anything I'm going to talk about in terms of references. We'll come back to that a bit later on. So here we have the application in a bit more detail. when a student first comes to fill in this, it's still, in terms of the information that's there, pretty similar, with all the areas that you initially complete, following on from the registration. So details about yourself, the contact information, how you're going to finance the course. Some suggestions to think about. I would say, for anyone you're supporting entering the application, please do say to them to use the blue help text from the question mark, from the blue question mark, because we work really hard on that information to make sure that it really pinpoints exactly what's being asked and what it means to enter the information that's being asked on the application. I'll talk about the more about you section in a minute in a bit more detail. But looking at those, so the first bit's obviously just about the person. As I said, really all about them. And then you get to the more sort of meatier information that's going to take a little bit more time to complete, including the education area. So it's really important to advise, even at this stage, to make sure that students have their qualifications or exam entries, certificates or transcripts to hand, because they're going to need that information to enter into the application. And, you know, even looking back to perhaps level twos, those things can easily get mislaid. So they'll need that information and ready to enter into the application. They can also enter their employment details here and any extra activities that they may be doing in preparation for higher education, such as summer schools or lectures, for example. I've just mentioned at the bottom there about the internal deadline. I know I mentioned it earlier, but it is something to think about if you haven't already. Just having that deadline in place so you know when you can get the applications through, start to complete the references, checking over them, so that essentially you're relaxed and they're relaxed, knowing everything is done before the actual deadline. But you've also got that time period for our support. You can contact us to our customer success team, or the student can contact our experience centre if they need that support as well with anything they need to do. So just, yeah, more about you. I just wanted to highlight this as a slide on its own, because we have added this section in the last year. Universities and colleges essentially asked us to have an area of the application where students could actually pinpoint any and list their circumstances in a certain area, rather than just put it in the personal statement. So these are some of the questions that are asked of that student when they go to that area. Do they have a disability? Are they eligible for free school meals? Are they estranged from their parents? So lots of areas where essentially the universities and colleges wanted us to put this in here, so they know if the student accepts the information, they can come to the application and see it straight away. So from the get-go, they'll know the circumstances, and obviously then they can work to put in place whatever they need to do to support that student. And that's not just for the first day of the course. It could be for an interview or an open day. It's just somewhere so they can understand those circumstances in a certain area. And there's lots of additional support that we've made available for students and for you to understand in terms of these circumstances on ucas.com. I've just highlighted this on this next page. So lots of support for students who are from a UK Armed Forces background, for example, support around, if you're going to, the box that's on the application, how we use the information about care experience at Kingston University as an example. So if you were to tick that box on the application, kind of almost like a case study to make it easier to understand what that would mean if you did so. So lots of different pages that are available here. Obviously, I will send these slides out afterwards, so hopefully, you can go straight to that link there and get that information where you require it. But it's just trying to really emphasize and say, if you include this information obviously on the application, you can still obviously put it in the personal statement. If you're comfortable in terms of the conversation you have with a student, this could be put in the reference, which we can talk about later. But essentially, if it's there, then that conversation can be started, whether at an interview or beforehand, to really support the student as much as possible. So do be aware of that area, the more about you section. Now I'm going to move on to personal statements just for a little bit at this point before we head to references, because there's a few things I wanted to mention with the personal statement. With the conversation around Journey to a Million and the growth of applications, we know obviously the change in the reference, as we look at in a minute. One of the reasons for doing so is to really support you having more time to support students with their personal statement, checking over them, looking at those drafts and making sure this is the area where a student includes as much information as possible to make their application stand out, essentially. Now, in terms of, I guess, the analogy of explaining how how important it is to make this stand out is if you had 10 applications in front of an admissions staff, the one that's got perhaps more evidence or from somebody starting earlier will probably make their application stronger because they've got more information to explain why it is they've chosen to do that subject, and rather just woken up and said, well, that seems like a good option, I'll do that. So this is really what my plug or idea to you is with personal statements, is rather than just diving into that 4,000 characters or 47 line box that we have and start typing up paragraph after paragraph. Little challenge to think even at this point is, what sort of work, or what are the super curriculars, as we call them, that's the students you're supporting, what are they doing at this point already above the syllabus that they're learning? Because those are the sorts of things that universities and colleges want to understand when they're reading the personal statement, because that's all evidence to say, I've done these things and this really enhances and makes me understand that this is the direction that I want to go. And I've listed some ideas around some of those points of evidence that you can challenge or support that they may have already done. I was actually at the Birmingham exhibition the last few days having this conversation with students and teachers, and even conversations that they're having at exhibitions with admission staff. There may be something that they've picked up about perhaps the learning environment or the software or something that they're going to be learning that they may go, right, I'm going to go and investigate that or learn a bit more about that to a slightly higher level, perhaps through a textbook or watch a tutorial. Or if it's a creative course, maybe a piece of software that's going to be used eventually by that student they may have trialed in preparation for perhaps joining that course later on. That then leads to things like open days, where you're speaking to, again, lecturers or students there, which again, you can pick up evidence or information to explain to where that person's applying to and things that they've picked up already. It can also come from work experience. And as we spoke yesterday, work experience doesn't have to just be in person. Obviously, during the pandemic, the online courses for work experience were really refined, and there were more than ever that were coming through to support students, and they are just as viable to be talking about in a personal statement. Lots of things that can be picked up that way. Then obviously you've got online lots of different TED Talks, video tutorials, podcasts that can be listened to, and then the physical, looking at articles, current affairs that are happening, books, reading lists. So lots of different ways that somebody may have actually just read something or seen something or done some work experience, and it's really important to say to them, jot the note down of that piece of evidence that you did, because you might see that in a month or so's time when you come to start putting together a paragraph or two of your statement, and you might just see the name of a book or the name of the person and you remember speaking to at an exhibition, and you'll be able to start talking about that journey from that point of that thing that you learned to really explain to where you're applying to that actually I know this is the subject for me and I know it's come to the forefront because I've put my time into it above everything else that I'm doing. And finally, UniBuddy I've put at the bottom there because I absolutely love this tool. I think it's something that if I had access to, I would have really loved, because coming from Dorset, very quiet area of Dorset, just having the opportunity to not only go to a university and speak to lecturers, but also speak to students that are at universities and colleges further away from where I am, really helping me understand what the environment's like to live in, what things there are to do, what's the course like, just getting that support from a student basis, which can be sometimes a bit more honest and different in terms of the perspective that they give. But students really like that, as I've heard yesterday, and I can imagine they would, because again, it's just a different perspective. But why I've included it here is because it's absolutely fine, again, to say if somebody has picked something up from those conversations to include in their application. So lots of different ways that you can encourage getting that evidence together now. And just to highlight, in our UCAS hub, the personal statement builder is the place to start jotting down those notes of those bits of evidence. So in the actual builder, underneath skills and achievements, that information could be put there. And also what you've got is a set of questions. So it'll ask, why are you applying for your chosen course? Why does the subject interest you? And essentially by answering those questions, you're starting to put the text together of the statement that you're writing. So in a way, you could just say, why don't you just pop on there and have a look at this, start jotting down some ideas in response to these questions, because when you come to write them later on, you'll start to piece together the statement from this information you're including here, and should help to start driving along into a first draft, then the redrafts, and your support then will be vital then looking over, obviously, as they put their drafts together. And as we look at references in a minute, that should explain that hopefully you'll have more time to do that going forward. And I've just included a little bit around our personal statement guides. So the great thing about the UCAS hub is when we know what somebody wants to apply to, say if it's biology, we'll say, hey, look, here's a personal statement guide about biology. So the sorts of things that would be relevant for if you're writing a biology personal statement. So the kind of pros and cons of what to include, just some support there. And we do that for different subjects. So that's another technique which you could use to help them to explain in a personal statement. But as you can see, I just wanted to make sure this was relevant in the update, because with the growth of applications, I really do feel that this is something to really support as much as possible going forward. And hopefully now, as we look at references, it will explain it a little bit more. So here we are then, references, the most significant change we're making to the application this year for sure. So, I mean, the first thing to say about the reference, the decision to come to this point obviously wasn't an overnight thing. We've spent lots of time with our admissions development groups and our advisory group, speaking to universities and colleges, teachers and advisors, making sure we come to this decision in the best way that benefits everyone and supports everyone, essentially. I mean, some of the reasons for making the reference change from an empty box, as it was, like the personal statement where you could enter 4,000 characters or 47 lines in, to changing it to 3 sections, was first of all to make sure there's that built-in clarity and confidence that everything you're entering into this reference is absolutely useful and providing information to the universities and colleges looking at it. So that's the first thing, and we've had their input about that, and we know this is going to help them. It's also to make sure that you have more time and resources allocated now, because of this, to students on their discovery and research phase. So when they're looking at those choices and where they want to go and making sure they've made the right options, but also for, as we just looked at a minute ago, supporting with the personal statement. So that's the area where the information and those drafts are refined to make sure that it is the best that they can put on the application. And essentially, by having 3 boxes, it also means that universities and colleges can easily find that information when they're making decisions on the application. So just before I talk a little bit more about each section in a bit more detail, obviously, since we went live with this information around April time, we have worked really hard to make sure that our page with this update on ucas.com has lots of information. So there's lots of reference exemplars on there now in terms of the 3 different sections. So do have a look at those as I talk about them in a minute for some advice on what to include. There's also a reference guided presentation. So if you need to download that and share that with colleagues or anyone else where you work to support them, please do access that to have a look at it, and that will support as much as possible. There is the videos that we do from universities and colleges. So again, it gives the context of why they want this change and what they're looking for. But the one thing to talk about the most is that there are lots of FAQs in there. And I'm fully aware that there'll be lots of questions around this, and there is ongoing lots of questions, and we have updated those FAQs as we've gone along with lots of different support. So I've hopefully tried to include some information now which will just explain the sections, but any of your questions, hopefully they'll be answered in there if you need to access that at any point. So I just want to talk about each section in a little bit more detail of the reference. The first section is the compulsory area of the reference. So essentially, this is where you definitely have to enter something, but the other 2 sections are optional. So it could be that you're writing completing a reference and you're only entering something into this first section. This is where you're contextualizing the education experience of the student you're writing it for. Now, that could be something important to let universities know, perhaps about the demographics of the school, or if there's any limitations to the portfolio of study that could be taken. Perhaps there's only certain subjects that were available to be taken by that student when they applied. It's essentially making the school, college, or centre policies known to the university and college that are looking at the application. You could also be talking in here about the the school, college or centre, anything that may have affected performance, such as significant staff changes, or if there was any damage to buildings, for example, that may have happened. You could also be talking about policies and processes that are used for how you predict grades, or if you're not predicting grades, perhaps some context to why that is. But that first section, as you can see, with the information that's being asked for, is going to be very similar for probably nearly all the students you're writing the reference for. So you can write that section as part of the reference template in the advisor portal. And when you come to write a reference for someone, you can literally just drop it straight in as they're clicking the button, and it just puts it in for you from the template that's already put together. And that's absolutely fine. And that's what we're trying to get to, this point that actually you could be putting together a reference and just including information in that first area and nothing else. So just be aware that you could put together, as your school, college or centre, details as a template and just drop it in for that first section. The other two areas, now this is obviously where it becomes a bit more individual, depending on who you're writing the reference for. Section 2, again, optional, not compulsory. So this is where you'd enter any information about extenuating circumstances which may have impacted the student's education and achievement. So some examples of that could be if there's any individual circumstances. So if there are, if they have a disability, if they have a chronic illness, if there's been perhaps a bereavement in the family or to a friend. You could also talk about any context as to why there's disparity between an individual's grades achieved throughout the school or college. So if there was a difference between the GCSEs and the predicted grades, and any factors perhaps that limited the student's choice of subjects. So you can give some more information on that. And I guess the main thing in here is following on to more about you. So the details that are put in that section. If a discussion and agreement has been had with the student you're writing the reference for, you could also talk about the support that's in place for that student at the moment in regards to those circumstances. And essentially, if you're putting the information in here, then the conversation can be started between the university and or the college and the student. So this is really the area to explain that in there. As I say, it's optional, so you wouldn't be entering this for every student, but it is that area where you'd put that detail. Section 3 is the area which we've done lots of work on and lots of updates to make sure that you're quite understanding of what needs to go in here. So we've put lots of exemplars of this and details again in our reference page on the website. This is where you can outline any other supportive information that's specific to the applicant and relevant to the course or courses that they're applying for that you think the universities and colleges should be aware of. So you'll know your students best. This is really the opportunity to let them know of any further circumstances. But this section isn't supposed to then become as the reference was before. So it's not supposed to be the perfect paragraph here. It should be short, concise, factual, short statements that help universities and colleges digest the information that they're looking at, essentially. And some ideas of what this could be is any evidence of perhaps suitability you need to make them aware of for the course they're applying to. So that may include performance and academic ability in their UK level 3 or equivalent qualifications, anything in regards to the work experience that they may have done, or if you wanted to include any information of a case where a student is the strongest performer in their cohort or there any extracurricular achievements, this is where you put that information. And you can also list any barriers that the student may have faced if they have done in any work experience or interview, for example, as well. I think, essentially with this area, you'll know your students best. So it's just looking over it. And to be honest, there probably is something that you'll more than likely be putting in a section for many of the students you're writing this for. So it's just looking at those areas that you just want to concise and it's basically refocusing the information from how it was before so that it can just be looked at in that section and read as concise statements rather than that carefully crafted prose as it was before, so the universities and colleges understand a little bit more about that student. We're going to be reviewing the reference at the end of the January equal consideration deadline, so after the 31st next year. So we'll be making sure to check that the changes we've made have been relevant and have worked. And obviously, if needs to be any further change, we'll look at that for 2025 going onwards. But I hope that gives a bit of an overall feel to what's being looked at in the reference. Do go onto our website for those further information points, exemplars, the questions that are asked, the FAQ, so do have a look. I'm just going to move on to CNC because it's not too far away now, just under 2 months, as you may know, for the 17th of August for A-level results day. And there is one significant change that we're making to support you, essentially, for the deadline, which I think is absolutely fantastic to really help you on the morning, which we know it's obviously still a huge day for you all, helping students. With the 17th of August being the main day that obviously A-level results can be accessed, the results can be looked at. We've actually looked with the embargo in place until 8 o'clock, which is when students will be able to access be able to see the UCAS hub, see their decisions. What we've now done is we've made a change to allow you to access the advisor portal from 7 o'clock on the 17th of August. So an hour before before your students will be able to see. That is still under embargo. So obviously under no circumstances can you disclose anything you see in that hour relating to exam results, application statuses, mentioning you shouldn't be mentioning anything to guardians, parents, any university or college or any colleagues really. So it's about thinking who's going to have access to this because it's still under under embargo. But as that second point says, it's really important, as we know, to make sure you've got the time to check the status of your applicants and identify who needs that support. So you'll now be able to log in and see who's in clearing or what the situation is, so you know where you can help as much as possible, and see those that are going to be like, right, they've got their place, they should be happy for the day. So just to make you aware that in the staff management section of the advisor portal, it is really important just to think about reviewing who has permissions to view offers and decisions because of this hour. So making sure that the right people are able to see this within that hour, just to really limit the amount of use that's going to be because of it being embargo, essentially. As it says at the bottom there, it's important anyone who can access that information is aware of the serious implications of breaching the embargo. So hopefully you'll have that set up and be aware of that, whoever's accessing it within that time. But hopefully that new significant change will work really well and get you set up for the day. So it'll be available from 7 o'clock. And what else is new? Well, this year we're going to actually allow the option to add a clearing choice from 1 o'clock. So be aware of that if you are helping any of your students on the day. They'll be able to go in and do that a little bit earlier than ever before. So they will have that significant time to do that. But it just means they can add it on their application a little bit sooner from 1 o'clock when they log into their UCAS hub if they're in that situation. And one of the other things that we've seen, and this has been something that's come up for a long time now, is that if a student's waiting for their decision, they may actually log in on the 17th of August and see that their decision still hasn't been made. They're still holding a conditional offer, and they're probably going to be quite worried, a bit of anxiety looking at it, thinking, right, all my friends have got their decisions, they're placed. Why is mine still showing as conditional? What's happening? So what we've done is we've added an option now for universities and colleges to add their reasons why this is still showing as conditional. So they can put that in and explain to the student what's happening. So for example, one of the ideas here, it says we require evidence of your A-level chemistry grade A taken in 2022. Can you scan and send it to us? So things like that. In the past, we'd get the phone calls, we get the contact, it's results day. What's happening? Why are we not placed? And we don't want anyone to log in and have that a panic or misunderstanding of what's happening. So they can clearly identify that and make that shown to students in the UCAS hub, so they'll know what's going on. So that's a new change we've added. And to help you, as you can see in the advisor portal, you'll be able to scan through your students and see who's got a decision that's delayed, and you'll be able to click on it to find out that information of what that is, just to highlight, so you're aware what's happening. They'll obviously be able to see it, but it's just that you're aware what's happening with that student. So it should really, really help going forward, as we do get lots of contact around that when they're just holding a conditional offer. they've seen their A-level results and thinking, okay, what's that, or any of the results, what's happening at the moment. So that should help clear up quite a lot. And just to finish off with a few resources that should help you going forward, our advisor guide for 2024 is now live. So that's the guide that has everything you need to know for the cycle. So yeah, absolutely do download that as a PDF or however you want to access that to go through the information you need to know for the cycle. But also, we've got a fantastic Parents' Evening presentation, which you can use going forward to explain everything in relation to UCAS, and some great guides, perhaps classroom-led activities, for example, around making an application. Lots of things delving on from what I've talked about today, personal statement guidance, for example, that can lead you through in presentation format from some PowerPoints we have for you. So that's all accessible in ucas.com/advisors. And to keep you up to date with everything that's happening, lots of webinars that we're doing on a monthly basis. So in terms of the reference area that we looked at earlier, there are some reference webinars specifically we did when we made the changes back in May. So you can watch them back with everything you need to know about references or confirmation and clearing or any aspect of UCAS. You can watch those that have happened or watch them live when they come through over the next few months. There's also lots of updates that we let you know about. You can sign up to our newsletter by email, so you can get that information straight through to your email, or you can go to our advisor section of ucas.com, where we have a timeline, and again, we will let you know what's happening in each month with the updates that you require. We also have digital training that you can access. In terms of the team that I'm in, our digital delivery team, we have a digital training modules that you can access around lots of areas: the UCAS Hub, references, the personal statement, apprenticeships, as I mentioned earlier. They're e-learning courses set up for you free to enroll on, to learn more about UCAS's processes and systems and really support your learning so you can help your students. So that's on our PDP. Yep, there's a link at the bottom there, pdp.ucas.com, and a picture there on the right hand side of what that looks like, so you can enroll on those free modules if you need that support to learn more. Any contact from here, if you want to get in touch with myself, training@ucas.ac.uk will be the email address I can pick up on, and we have our customer success team who are available Monday to Friday on the phone number and email address there. So do get in touch with us for any more questions. But otherwise, I'm here. I can certainly help with anything else that you have. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ross. I'll add in that I have done some of those online digital training sessions. They were really useful, so I'd highly recommend them to anyone who hasn't had a look, because they were actually really helpful for me as well.